How come my approval ratings have gone up and the intention of people to vote for me has also increased? It means that the culture battle is bearing fruit. And the Argentine people have decided to mature, put on long pants, do things right once and for all. So this goes well beyond the individual Javier Milei. This means that the Argentine people have decided to espouse freedom, and that is the best message.
Today, we're honored to host a figure who has not only captivated the attention of his nation, but has stirred conversations around the globe. A figure whose meteoric rise in politics is matched only by his unyielding dedication to core conservative principles. Today, we welcome President Javier Milei to the Sunday Special. An economist by profession and a maverick by nature, President Milei has become a polarizing figure in Argentine politics. Milei has risen to prominence through his outspoken criticism of fiscal irresponsibility, his advocacy for reducing the size of government, and his unique ability to connect with the disaffected voters tired of traditional politics. In 2018, Milei became the most interviewed economist on television, with 235 interviews, also hosting his own radio show, Demoliendo Mitos, or Demolishing Myths. In 2023, Milei ran for president as part of La Libertad Avanza, and as inflation rose above 100% in the country, so did Milei's position in the polls. On November 19, 2023, he defeated his political opponent, Sergio Massa, in a landslide historic election, gaining the highest percentage of the vote since Argentina became a democracy. In his victory speech, Milei promised a reconstruction of Argentina and the end to its economic decline, a new era. Since taking office, President Milei has lowered the number of ministries from 18 to 9, deregulated the Argentine economy, and slowed inflation in the country. In today's conversation, we explore Milei's incisive views on the current state of the West, dissecting the ideological battles that threaten the foundational principles of freedom and prosperity. President Milei, it's an honor to meet you. I want to start by asking you, how do you make such audacious moves economically? What was the lead up? For people who don't know anything about Argentina, what was the situation that led to your election, and how does that give you the freedom to actually make such audacious moves economically?
Well, to begin with, when we took office, we inherited the worst possible inheritance an Argentine government ever got in all of our history. And when a country has twin deficits amounting to 4 points of GDP, that's a yellow alert, 8 is red alert, we inherited 16% of GDP. This meant we were facing a situation in which structurally there was a monetary imbalance that was even worse than what we had had in 1975 before the Rodrigazo crisis in Argentina. The situation in the central bank was much worse than in 1989 before the hyperinflation period during President Alfonsin's government, and the social indicators were at levels worse than in 2001. So it was the sum of all evils. It was obvious that Argentina needed to make an adjustment, and the fact is that the only way to pursue an adjustment without financing required a shock therapy, which had to be really abrupt given this constellation of imbalances. In fact, if the crisis had exploded, today we wouldn't just be looking at hyperinflation, but at 95% poor and probably 50 or 60% extreme poor. So in that context, there was no alternative but an adjustment. So we announced a zero deficit program, an adjustment in order to no longer have a fiscal deficit and to we were hoping that zero deficit would be achieved during 2024 at some point. All analysts predicted that would be impossible to achieve, and we basically succeeded in doing that within a single month. So that part of the adjustment means that we made the largest fiscal adjustment adjustment in the history of humanity. And this has been recognized by the IMF. So within 3 months, we made an adjustment amounting to 12 points of GDP. And inflation for December had been at 25%. In January, it fell to 20. In February, it went down to 13. It is expected that in March, which is a very complex month, it will be around 12.5%. And that has two direct consequences, one of them being that my approval rating is at the same level as when I took office, which is the best time a president enjoys when they first take office. And what I think is most important here, and I think, Ben, you will also see this, in the face of such an adjustment, how come my approval ratings have gone up and the intention of people to vote for me has also increased? It means that the culture battle is bearing fruit. And the Argentine people have decided to mature, put on long pants, do things right once and for all. So this means that the Argentine people have decided to espouse freedom, and that is the best message. And this is what drives us to keep going, because we know that the way from A to B wouldn't be a straight and trouble-free line. But what matters is that we know where we want to go. And, the Congress of Argentina may approve my reforms or not. But if they don't approve them now, I intend to send them to Congress after 2025, when we have a more favorable structure in Congress. And not only will I complete the 1,000 reforms I have already sent in, but also I will send the other remaining 3,000.
It's astonishing because you're doing all of these audacious things, and people in the West, particularly on the left, I think are confused by this. I think that they treat it as something anathema. Even people on the right don't understand the audacity of what you're doing. But what you campaigned on, capitalism, freedom, private property, liberty, all of these things used to be a core part of the West. What example should Argentina play for the rest of the West in how they went the wrong way?
Well, in that regard, we think the most important thing was the previous culture battle. All of these ideas that the world has been embracing in recent years, and this political correction, which basically means embracing socialist ideas, this is socialism in different stripes. What you need to do is realize that Argentina tried out all these things. The stupidity of social justice. Argentina is an iconic example of social justice and of the damage it can do, social justice, that is. So what you need to understand is that Argentina, as part of this process that led to it being the wealthiest country in the world and then being number 140. This is why in Davos I said the West is in danger, because we gave up the ideas of freedom that create prosperity, and we started to embrace the ideas of decadence, socialist ideas. And therefore, what happened in Argentina was that these ideas permeated things. Gramsci had worked very nice in Argentina. It had permeated education, culture, politics. Wherever you look, there was socialism. The media. So this is why the role of young people has been so important in this process. Because young people are naturally rebellious when it comes to the status quo. And young people, being exposed to so much socialism, naturally responded by being liberal. That's the first point. The second point is that, being young, they had been exposed for much less time to the brainwashing process in public education. And another thing was that as they have access to social media, one of the things I used to do when I went on TV, something that I still do, was to quote my reference authors. And this made young people go and check out who these authors were. What with YouTube and Google and search engines, the book downloads, that led to an explosion of knowledge. In fact, our greatest authority on freedom and liberty in Argentina, Dr. Venegas Lynch Jr., the founding fathers, I like to call him, used to say the great difference between this movement and the one in the late 80s was that this time young people were really educated. We would organize what we call the concerts. There were political rallies, but the format was more like a Rolling Stones concert. One of the wonderful things is that at these rallies, we had stands, like, in concerts with T-shirts, memorabilia, and different items. And there were stands as well with books. And Argentines decided to choose a much more radical, profound, and aggressive change that we represented. And this is very interesting because at one point, Mrs. Bullrich said something brilliant. You should pay more attention to what Milei is doing. It's not normal for a politician to be talking to 20 or 30,000 people about Hayek. And I've taught many courses, and one was monetary theory. I'm a specialist in economic growth with and without money. So I can lecture on growth, on money, and on growth with or without money. And so in my head, I said to myself, I'm teaching a class on the nominal anchor with 20,000 people in the audience. That was also very powerful. The Chinese have a symbol that means crisis and opportunity as well. And that was what the pandemic became, because it not only led to revaluing freedom, and young people did a great job in their own homes too, because they started to evangelize at home with their parents and grandparents. So what happens is when you don't like what you are seeing on TV, you can get hold of a channel changer and change channels. But when your children start saying Milei, 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 you might not listen the first time, not the second time, but you don't have a channel changer for your children. So at the end of the day, they got their parents to listen to me. And this is what helps explain this success story. But what you need to understand is that this wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't been for the culture battle.
Yeah, there's a philosophy that's arisen in the West, and that philosophy is that if you fail in life in a free system, it's because you have somehow been victimized. And I think maybe one of the reasons Argentinians are now more positive, more hopeful, is because they're grabbing control of their own lives. In a free system, they get to rise or fall on their own merit. When you extend that to foreign policy, that philosophy that failure is victimhood, you end up with anti-Westernism. And you've been fighting that in your own country as well. You've been reorienting Argentina away from certain countries and toward the West more, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, whether it's Israel. Maybe you can speak about that. You've obviously talked about moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. You want to draw closer to Western allies. What's the importance of that?
Okay, let's take one thing at a time. The Argentine people have matured. They have put on long trousers. What I mean by this is that they managed to understand that we can't keep putting the blame on others for what's happening to us, whether it be the United States or Europe or the IMF or whoever. In fact, one of the points I raised during the campaign has to do with the fact that I said, unlike other politicians, when there's an election coming up, a traditional politician asks you to vote for them in order for you to give them the power to control your life. In other words, they treat you like a kid, even worse than a teenager. Faced with this, we said to ourselves, we don't want to do that. When we ask for a vote, it is in order to give you back freedom and for you to be the architect of your own destiny. So we have decided to embrace the values of the West. And embracing the values of the West means embracing the ideas of the founding fathers of the United States. In fact, the original Constitution of Argentina was to a great extent fashioned after the U.S. Constitution, drafted mainly by Juan Bautista Alberdi in 1853. And in 1860, when that was implemented, Argentina ended up becoming a leading world power after having been a backwater. So embracing the values of the West is fundamental in order to again become a developed country. In fact, what we are trying to do is to be like Ireland, which from being the poorest European country, within 30 or 40 years, managed to achieve per capita GDP 50% higher than that of the United States. That's a model. That's what we would like to do. And that means that we need to embrace the values of freedom. You can only be successful in capitalism offering better goods at a better quality at a better price. So you're a social benefactor. You are the epitome of loving thy neighbor in capitalism.
What you're saying is embedded even in Adam Smith, who wrote A Theory of Moral Sentiments before he wrote A Wealth of Nations. The basic idea that man is made in the image of God from Genesis, the basic idea that we're all supposed to be equal before the law, which comes again from the Bible, the basic idea of property rights, which also is in the Bible. All of that, as you say, is the backdrop to capitalism. You speak about this stuff so eloquently.
So that goes to show that it's a very tough position to be in, and it requires a very bold personality. And if you take a look at my electoral campaign, there's no historical precedent of someone who has been so violently attacked during an election campaign, violating the rules of any other electoral campaign. They've actually started meddling with my private life. They've said all sorts of horrible things about me, my sister, my parents. They've even talked about my dogs.
The eyes of the world are on Argentina, they're on you, because if you're able to transform Argentina, it's not just going to be a model for the rest of Latin America, but also for the West, because Argentina was a cautionary tale. You could make it into an example. The people of Argentina, by sticking with your program, can make an example of success in the face of socialism. What is your hope for the future? How optimistic are you?
We will recover and are going to lay the foundations for Argentina to be great again. And we believe that that will be a major lesson to give up socialist ideas, or that is an enormous challenge for which it's worth keeping up the fight until the last drop of blood.
President Milei, it is an honor to have you. Thank you so much for the time.
It's been a true pleasure for me, Ben. Thank you very much indeed for this interview.